everyone. My name is Chanel Simone, and thank you for tuning into Bauce Radio. This is going to be an amazing episode as we talk about the African American achievement gap that we face in our culture. I have two special guests here for you all who will definitely break down what are we lacking as a whole as African Americans, why we can't obtain the good job, why we don't have the resume reviews, why we don't have the good professional attire, everything in one. We're going to discuss this. Right now at the bottom, I have Ayana Thomas. Hello, love. She is the founder of Liberty Rights LLC. And I have Cedric Ward up here. Cedric Ward is also the founder of Alexander and Rai Enterprises Incorporation. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we all know, the world is in a chaotic state right now. Black Lives Matter is spurring up a lot of things right now, and it's talking about the equality that we don't have in America. So the number one thing that companies now are doing is speaking out vocally. You have corporations who seen the protests, you have corporations who hear our cry, seen the peaceful march, but now this is more than ever that I've ever seen corporations come out and speak on behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement. And also they are now bringing in workplace equality more than ever. So we're gonna get down to the nitty gritty here. And one thing that we do know is African Americans face the most obstacles in getting a good job. So we're gonna start back from the roots of why is it that African Americans constantly get the backlash? Why do we always get the short end of the stick? So we're gonna go ahead and dig deep now about why us? What is the number one reason you feel like is hindering us from achieving?
Okay, so so that's such a broad question. And there is no right answer, I don't think. I think what might be helpful is for us to speak to it from our various perspectives and then kind of just go from there because, I think it would almost be a disservice to us and to our community to try to lump everybody or everything into one bucket, if that makes sense. And so what I can say is from my experience, and this is my experience as a recruiter, a corporate recruiter, but then also my experience just working sort of like in connection with the frontline teams that I work with on a day-to-day basis. I think that, so maybe there's a lack of mentorship. Let's just start there, right? And I think that might be one of the main keys that I see is that people don't know how to access things because they don't have guidance, right? And so whether that is because they are from a broken home or they're from a home with a single parent structure or they're from a home where there is no guardianship structure, whatever the case may be, or as an adult, they just were never told to seek out a mentor and they don't really have anybody who can guide them in professional spaces. I think that is one of the huge keys that I think is lacking is just guidance and mentorship. And so a lot of the work that I do and really have the privilege and benefit of doing is really trying to connect with people on a one-to-one level to see what they need and then from there figure out where we need to go. Because a lot of times it's just bouncing an idea off of you, having somebody like, oh my goodness, I have this idea and I have no idea where to go to get this answer. Will you make a few minutes for me to be able to kind of work through some things? And so I think that is number one. I think, we have some time so we can kind of dig a little bit deeper into what it all looks like. But from a professional perspective, I've seen people come to interviews in jeans or, I've seen people just not prepared. And it's not because they don't have good intentions, it's just because they may not have any guidance. And so I think one of the huge pieces that we're lacking in the African American community is mentorship. And I think there's so much competition and it's the crab in the barrel ideology where if I get mine, I'm gonna just look out for myself. And I might invest back into the community by way of charitable donations so that my business benefits, but overall I may not really be interested in giving back. So I think it's finding the people who are really interested in giving back and then tapping into those resources and then figuring out how do we spread the wealth? How do we share these messages so that people have access to the information?
Okay. And those are definitely great points there. Now, the mentorship starts in the household. We live in a society where most of us are a paycheck from being evicted. If we get fired, if anything was to happen in the workplace. So you have parents who, yes, they have kids, but their main focus is not Their main focus is working and make sure that they're providing to put food on the table. You know, sometimes parents have that responsibility where the educators step in and, oh, you're supposed to be, you know, teaching my kid this and that because I don't have time. I have to work. And some parents, single parents, work in 2 jobs. So most people think that it starts with the education system and how schools are not teaching the correct curriculum into teaching us how to do interviews, how to have a certain attire. So do you feel like it's the educational part of it too? But besides the mentorship and household, how do you feel about the education system taking a part into this achievement gap?
Okay, good question. So your question is more or less the educational system, correct?
Well, we're going to bring here, you know, both of you all are educators, so let's talk about the education system.
Okay, well, I would say yes in some regards and no in other regards, because essentially the main post of education really should come from the household, and then the schools are really just supplements to something greater. But since that's not the case, we can delve into it, because I feel like there are 2 types of education. You have a real world education, you have formal. So you can be formally educated and really still not really know anything about the world, because you may not really have a world view. So the real world education really, in some cases, is more important than formal, but you need both. So let me reiterate, you need both. As I was saying, the conversation at the dinner table is a very, very vital piece of the rest of the story, as I always call it, because that's where you will get the information that's passed down in reference to information, debates, discussions, critical thinking. All those things will take place, which you may or may not get at school, but the child has given the opportunity to use that to his advantage at the home. So, which your other colleague just mentioned, the family structure plays a part in that, because if it's a single mother or it's disjointed, the child may not necessarily get that information in terms of on a daily basis. So it really is just a situation of reinserting or reconfiguring the family structure first, so you can get the proper education, so you can get the proper values and things of that nature. So we kind of really need to go back and fix some things and then come back up, in my opinion, in terms of get a proper education, which is to really get to understand the world in which we live in, and that will provide you the information that we just spoke about. If someone comes to an interview with jeans on, that means they haven't been properly educated on the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like sometimes we may be going 2 steps up and 1 step backwards, because we really just don't really know how things work. So we need to kind of engage and re-engage situations or children or youth in that regards of just simply how things work in life.
Okay, so how do you all feel about the curriculum within the education system? So like you said, it does, and I agree, it does start within the household. And if they're not getting it at home, they're going to get it elsewhere. So if the education system is not providing those courses or those curriculums and to teach us everyday life skills, then where else do they get it from? Of course, that leads to activities that's, you know, leads to gang violence, it leads to kids doing things that they're not supposed to do. And then when it's time to step into the real world, we look at, oh, they're not educated. They talk like this. They don't even know what customer service is. And now we over here getting the backlash of, oh, we're just blacks and we don't understand this and that. And that's why the employment rate is low. That's why everything is down. So how do we connect with the curriculum? Well, I know I asked, how do you feel about the curriculum within the education system if it's not being provided at home?
So I think as a parent, I think the curriculum in the private school system is all backwards. And so, and not just the curriculum, but so for example, this year my daughter was in the 5th grade. And this year, all of her assignments were done electronically. And so, and I feel like we're stuck in the middle of this transition where we're going from traditional methods to technological methods. And in some ways, it's useful because all the kids know now is technology. You know, some of the things that we grew up with and things that we did, they don't even understand or have a use for them anymore. However, some of the fundamental skills like organization, making a plan, managing responsibilities, these are things that they don't have really a way to grasp anymore, because if everything is kind of spelled out for them on the sort of like in the queue, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go to the queue, they check it, they do what they're supposed to do, but beyond that, they don't really have a way to manage information or manage time. I think, you know, if your question is, what are my thoughts on the education system? I think that, you know, going back to what Cedric said, as parents and guardians and mentors and leaders in the community, it's really incumbent upon us now to really step in and take an active role in everyone, in all the young people, K through 12th grade, and then even college, young adult, because they're navigating transitions that many of us have not seen before. And in addition to that, they're exposed to so much more information. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they've got a lack of really clear curriculum in school, and then they're outside in the world on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and all these other platforms, and they're learning, that's where they're learning everything from. And so it's really important that as parents, leaders, guardians, mentors, we really step in and kind of help them maintain balance and perspective with everything that they're trying to navigate and understand. Because again, without that balance or that perspective, they really will not succeed. It will be in a terrible place in the next 10 to 15 years if parents and anyone who's in a position of influence, teachers, if we're not really taking an active role in the lives of our students, whether that be young people or even adult learners. Because again, working with a predominantly frontline staff, I've worked with a lot of 23, 24, 25-year-olds, and although they're grown, right? They're grown, many of them have families of their own. In terms of a maturity level, they just have not had a space to really develop that maturity level. And so they're bouncing from position to position, maybe place to place, place of employment to place of employment. And until someone really steps in and says, hey, boo, what are you doing? Like, slow down, think about this, consider this. You know, some of them are really just kind of trying to get from step to step. They don't really know how to make those moves. So,
So that's a great point. She just echoed everything I was thinking about in terms of the technology-driven education that they're doing now, which leaves them in a deficit socially. So we have to remember, being socially educated is 90% of the battle, because if you can't interact and you can't apply what you're learning socially, then it's not going to matter anyway. So as far as soft skills, you can just see them in action in terms of the lack of the things that we take for granted, more or less, versus what they really need to know. But the key words you mentioned was balance. We can balance the technology, the academia or the curriculum side, the social side. I think we can get a better product. But somebody with influence has to be the one to do it, because if we all know, leaders have one thing in common. It's called influence. So if you don't have any influence, you may have a lot of knowledge as an older adult, but if you're not influential, then you're negated in their minds. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so easy why the neighborhood dope boy, the gang member, is cooler than dad, because they don't have the wisdom to disseminate information and saying, okay, dad is not cool, but dad has more information. So they see it opposite based on, the influences that they have, such as hip hop. And I'm a hip hop head. The only difference between our generation was that we didn't live the music, we just listened. Mm-hmm. So that's changed in the last 20 plus years. They're actually trying to live the music through dress, through mannerisms, gestures. So the whole thing is just, we're in a big whirlwind right here. So it's the people with the influence, leaders, we have to step in and make sure that we're being heard. And if we can mount up and basically beat them, because we have more numbers. But unfortunately, in our generation, my generation, we like to drive by the hood. We don't necessarily like to go in the hood. Mm. So we're wrong in a lot of areas as well, because we made it out, or so-called, but we're not giving the information back so they can understand what we're saying and then be able to apply it and putting the two together, then bring the balance, then they can move on.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that you all mentioned was how times are changing, especially with social media. Now, I'm a 90s baby, so we are called the social media era. And a lot of people say that millennials and Generation Z that we're labeled as lazy, we're labeled as self-centered, and how we don't have the communication skills and people skills, because now there's apps for everything where you don't even have to socialize with anybody. You don't even have to speak. You don't have to say 2 words. And as Ayana mentioned, it's so many times that I'm writing and I forgot how to even spell February, but I know Apple would automatically spell it for me. So I'm not even trying to process how to write again, how to spell again. So with this day and age, is it going to be more, as you said, is going to be more harmful with the upcoming jobs now and upcoming how people speak, how they communicate? How do you feel about in the next 10, 15, 20 years, or even 5 years from now, because things are moving quickly? How you feel like this day and age would jobs and young people obtaining jobs be?
So I think, honestly, we got to get through the rest of this year first.
Yeah.
I legitimately think we need to get through the end of 2020, get through the end of COVID, and figure out where do we go from here? Because, you know, right now the job market is in a really unique place because, like, essential services are all hiring. All of your essential businesses that have been operating throughout COVID, the majority of them are still hiring, but then there are some other fundamental businesses that are suffering greatly, like education, right? And so, you know, you really need to, I think we need to wait it out and kind of see what's going to happen in the rest of this year. And then, you know, from there, kind of map out what will happen, because there will be a long road to recovery in the next 3 to 5 years for people who have been unemployed for so long, just trying to get back to work. So I think that's the first thing. And then also taking into consideration that now they're going to be competing with this generation that you spoke about. So in many ways, you have folks like, I worked with a client not too long ago who had been working on a job for 30 years. And so he and folks that are like him are trying to navigate the workplace market in a place where they're competing with 23, 24, 25-year-olds. And so I think it will be really interesting to try to figure out where we are by the end of this year and the next 3 to 5 years. But I think I'm curious to see if organizations are going to shift to sort of meet the technological boost that we're going to see, because all of these kids that are graduating from high school know how to code, they know how to do all of these really sophisticated things. And like you said, Cedric, they may not have the social skills, but from an intellectual perspective, if you put them behind a computer, they can make it work, right? And so I think it'll be interesting to see how organizations and how services shift to really meet the needs and the skill sets of the people. Or are these children and teenagers, young people, are they going to have to go back to school, go to trade school, go to some other place where they can enhance their skills so that they can fit in with the market? So I think it'll be really interesting. It'll be interesting to see what other industries start shutting down. So where a lot of us learned customer service in retail spaces, a lot of the retail stores are closing down. And so I think, again, it's going to just be really interesting to see where we go, where we end up in the next 18 months, and how that's going to influence the next 5 to 10 years from a job market, job perspective.
And that's one thing that someone told me, that trade schools are going to go up tremendously. I think 2020 is definitely bringing out more of the skills, now more of the labor skills. So I definitely think, some people think that universities are going to start shifting courses or majors. That's probably, like, no offense, like, let's say art majors or anything like that. I definitely think colleges are definitely about to start shifting curriculums and also shifting majors to the point where now people need real life skills, like the carpenter, the electrician, the mechanic, the everything else. So that's one thing that I do agree with you, Ayana, is the trade schools. I definitely think education system is going to shake up as well with the skills. Now, Ayana, as you being a corporate recruiter, what are things that you see that kind of put you in a spot like, okay, well, this person, I see this, I see that. What do you look for as far as when you're trying to recruit someone? Or what do you think is the problems that you do see in most?
I think it's articulation. One is people are extremely skilled or extremely gifted, and they just don't know how to articulate that. And so resume writing resume writing and really navigating the job market is really a skill set, right? You have to be able to do it well. And so a lot of times you'll have people who have skills and they have tremendous abilities, but they don't know how to articulate that in writing. So like you said, if you have somebody who's in the trades, they may be a very gifted journeyman, or they may be, HVAC technician with 20 or 30 years of service. And they've done that. They focused on that aspect. And so in terms of being able to translate what they do on a day-to-day basis in writing, they a lot of times don't know how to do that. And so they will pull on family or friends or someone like me who can kind of help them sort of rewrite and phrase the things that need to be phrased for what a recruiter would be looking for. But I think that's probably the biggest challenge is articulation. And then I think maybe a second and third challenge would also go with representation. So you get a resume from someone and they are well articulated in writing, but then they show up and they're not prepared professionally. I had a person come for a job interview and they didn't even come for the right job. So they didn't take the time to prepare. They didn't know what they were coming to interview for. So I think representation would be next. And then the next piece is access, right? So that's what most of this conversation is about, is just having access to the tools and the resources necessary to be able to represent yourself and articulate yourself well.
Okay, now Cedric, I'm gonna ask you this. Now that times are changing, especially more and more Americans are pretty much paying attention to the systematic racism of what's going on. Do you feel like with applying for a job, should they take out the race and the identity? I heard that's another thing that's being discussed. I heard a criminal background might be taken out. I don't know how I feel about the criminal background yet. That's being discussed. I agree with that too. But how do you feel about jobs now? Or how do you feel like they're going to move forward with the non-discrimination?
Well, that's a good question. I'm really in the middle with it. Ayana, she posed a good point in your previous question in terms of what we need to bring to the table, regardless of what your color is in the first place. So I'm not necessarily personally looking for an edge up just simply because I'm Black. However, since I am Black, I would like a fair opportunity to provide the services or whatever it is that you need to get it done. So it's like a situation of back and forth with me. In some ways I agree. It's almost like asking me, do I agree with affirmative action? Some cases I do, some cases I don't. It depends on the situation, because everything is situational and it depends on the situation. However, I am a proponent of being prepared for whatever it is you're trying to do. For example, I would always tell my class, there are more jobs than you think they are. The problem is, do you have the skill set, and are you qualified for the job they're asking you to do? So that's the question that always gets silenced. So if we are prepared for the job, whatever it is that we're trying to engage in, then that makes it harder for the recruiter to look at the racial, because the person is qualified. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because I'm not naive. I'm a Black man in America. I understand the racial issues when it comes to employment. But what I am saying, the problem within us is being prepared, being articulate, just like Ayana said. So when it comes to it, you need to make it more of a harder decision than they're making it. It does not need to be a blowout. It needs to be like, well, you know what? That person was just as qualified as you are. So we have to kind of still go back to those preliminary questions of what's wrong in the first place. So when we do get to the table to do business, we're ready and prepared for it.
Mm-hmm. And I think
that's our problem. We're not prepared. She just made a great point. Being prepared, articulation, presentation, knowing the game. I hate to use that word, but we have to learn how to know the game and play the game and beat them at their own game.
And that's one thing that some people say about African Americans is, do you feel like we play the blame game a lot? Like blaming the education system, blaming the parent household? How do you feel? Because earlier when we was talking about, I know you said it starts at the table. So you do have it where you have households where you do have single parents, but you have mom producing multiple kids. So right now she can't focus on each individual one. You have no fathers in the household. You brought up mentorship. Some people feel like they don't have nobody to turn to, so they probably go to grandma, you know?
Okay.
Babies raised by grandmas, baby raised by uncle and aunties, and then they go to school, and the school system teaching us about geometry that we're probably not going to use within the next 10, 15 years. And it's like everything, it could be a cycle for us, as in where do I turn to? Parents not doing it, the school system not doing it, the streets is not doing it. How do you feel like as a race, how could we be unified, or how could we put past, I'm not saying we can't put it past, because we have to be, you know, we have to be open-minded about it, that the poverty, the racism, everything is still there. But how do we collectively as a race come together, whether it's a fifth grader, a high schooler, somebody who just started college, actually put together, okay, this is the traits that I need to know and everything else?
I mean, again, I appreciate what you're doing. And I think that that question is so broad. I think that, you know, in an ideal world, we would all come together, we would all kumbaya, and we would all be, you know, we would all be blessed and highly favored and all those things. I think, however, what I'll say is the first thing I think is that people have to make a decision to be better, right? Regardless of what that looks like, right? People have got to, and regardless of age, people have got to make a decision to be better, to pursue better, to think higher, to welcome disorientation, and to be committed to development, right? Because that's the only way that all of this will change or will make a difference, is if you're committed to development. And what I found is that people just don't want to try. Like, they want to take the easy route. They want to do the things that, you know, I'd rather pay you to do it for me than to learn how to do it myself, right? And that is not restricted to a generation. That's kind of broadly. But to get out of playing the blame game, I'm not really sure. I don't know that I have a really good idea. I hate to see it. I hate to really to interact with that. And so I always try to push people. I always try to really get people to think and consider and be intentional about what they're doing. I would love to find a solution for that, because I think we would be so much better as a race, as a people, as a family, if we embraced each other. I mean, the tragedies in Chicago over the weekend are so telling for just where we are as a people, and the fact that, you know, we don't see value in our own lives. You know what I'm saying? It's all about me. It's all about how I'm going to gain. And so I think we have to shift that from looking sort of inward and focusing a little bit more outward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Sid?
Great question. She hits on the head every time. As far as, again, situational, we need to teach younger people, and I've found it to be that we have to teach older people that it's not necessarily a race every time, which goes back to the analysis and critical thinking of dissecting a situation. It depends. It simply just depends. But we also need to find the value in being accountable for our own actions,
Mm-hmm.
which essentially can sometimes indirectly affect the actions of others. We may be the root cause of it and not know it.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that all the time. So it appears to be a racial, but it just really just could be, you know what, you just made a big mistake. And it looks like it's race. But we can go on and on about that, because that's a continuous conversation in our community at this point about whatever avenue you want to take it to. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the middle with it. It just depends on the situation and what's going on. But we have to teach self-reliability, self-confidence, number one. So I guess I have a term I use. Sometimes we have to re-educate. Well, let me back up. We need to deprogram and reprogram. So a person could have a certain educational experience, but essentially it really could be wrong in their thinking. So sometimes even that person has to be deprogrammed and reprogrammed, so to get the proper understanding. So to me, most of the things that are taking place in our community is either the miseducation or the lack of education. Because you can be educated, but you've been miseducated. So you don't really understand what you're doing. You're really hurting the person. For example, I'll give you a prime example and I'll close on this. And this is my personal opinion. uh, boycott Walmart, boycott Targets, burn everything down, whatever it is. But I had one question that no one seems to be able to answer. So if I help perpetuate boycotting major corporations in America, essentially indirectly I'm hurting Black people who work there. So if that person is unemployed now because of lack of sales and lay them off, I'm directly or indirectly responsible for them having no job now. So to me, that's not helping the situation. I think what we need to do is to learn again the world, learn the markets, learn how things work, get involved in things, participate on the local level politically, because politics drive the economics. And then the communities will change because there's more economy, there's more prosperity in the community, and then we can create our own jobs if we want to take it on a race scenario. But I'm not going to indirectly or directly hurt my own people because I know the game. I know how politics work. It'll make it seem one way, but indirectly they end up hurting your own people, and that's that we fall for that trap every time. So that's just my piece on that.
Now, said you might have stubbed some toes talking about you thinking about the African Americans that work, the Blacks that work there, because a lot of people are charging towards the executive boards, the CEO or the founders of how the company started. Just like people talk about Amazon, and I'm about to wrap it up as well. When people talk about Amazon and how Amazon is on the track of being $1 trillion company, first company ever to be valued at $1 trillion, but how he treat his employees is how, they don't have the right sanitation, they don't have gloves, they don't have this and that. So some people don't even think about the employees that work there. They got to feed the kids, they got to put food on the table that pays the bills. They thinking about these CEOs, the founders who started as, white Americans who don't necessarily care about us per se, even though it's mixed race who do work at these establishments. It's not just African Americans. There's some Asians, there's white Americans as well. So some people feel like if the CEOs and everybody don't care about African Americans, then why should we care? Especially when the executive board, if you call out all executive boards, I guarantee you it's probably 99.9% white. They don't have no type of diversity and inclusion set in place for minorities, not even just Blacks, for Asians, for Latinos. A lot of people are sticking up with the Latinos as well because, number one, they're almost in the same bracket as us. So I definitely do feel like I work for a company where they're really big on diversity and inclusion. And before all of this took place, I did acknowledge that, okay, they do take pride in who work for them. So how do you feel like, to wrap up the question, how do you feel like the executive boards now should shake up, having like-minded individuals, minorities on their board as well?
Well, good question, but I'll give a backdrop of why I said what I said.
Okay.
Because what happens is, for example, let me give you an example, and I'll just be very brief. This is what happens and how they play the game. The COVID hit, right? Corona hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, stocks start pummeling. Okay, they sell them off, make tons of money, and then they go right back and buy the same stocks at pennies on the dollar, right? So they make money twice. So what my point is, whatever society is doing, they have a counter for it. So for example, if we went after the executive directors or boards, they'll still find a way indirectly to lay off the people we're trying to save.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it depends on the company, depends on their inclusion, how they're going to do what they're doing in terms of bringing Blacks in. Because let's face it, if these killings were not taking place, it wouldn't be taking place. So sometimes I feel like it's tokenism. That's just my personal opinion. And sometimes I think it's real. It depends on the company. I think it's situational, depending on the company and how they're going to do it and how they really feel about it. Some is just, hey, get off my back. You guys are getting on my nerves. Here, take these positions, get out of my way. So it depends.
Mm-hmm.
But if we play and understood the game from a global standpoint, how it worked, we can do the same thing. That's all I've been saying since day one. If the stocks are down and reduce prices, then we should buy the same stocks. So if I wear Jordan, I know a guy that wears Nike every single day. Every time I see him, he has the freshest Nikes ever. And I asked him a question. I said, why don't you own any stock in Nike? It doesn't make any sense. But then I thought about it. He's never heard anyone ask him that. So if we can take more of us, a little bit that we do know in life, and share over time, not now, over time, we can start changing the mindset. Because to me, it's a mindset and it's a value system. Those are the two things that guide you in this life.
Gotcha. Okay, Ayana, if you have anything to wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so first of all, I think that again, we're in a very unique place. I think we just kind of have to watch and see how things shake out. I think a lot of these organizations are making these really swift moves to protect their Black dollar. And so they rely heavily on the investment that the Black community makes, what directly or indirectly to their brands. And so I think a lot of these moves are made to really protect the income stream from the Black communities. I just want to sort of posit a thought, I guess, which is, you know, I've seen and interacted with a number of executives who are in these spaces that you're talking about, where they're adding Black faces to executive boards and all these things. And I think that it's really important for us to be mindful is that while a person is there, the stress level, the just the pressure, the microaggressions that those people deal with, you know, the question is really, is it worth it, right? So you have a Black, and not just is it worth it, but will their voice be heard? And not only will their voice be heard, are they the right ones to represent us? When you look at Ben Carson, he got a seat at the table, but is he the right person to represent the Black community, right? And so I think there's again, these are so good questions. I wish that, you know, I hope that this goes far and reaches a lot of people, because the questions that you're posing are so broad, and it really requires us to put our hands around this as a community together. But, you know, for me, again, it goes back to the stress and the pressure that those people are going to endure getting to those really high places. Are they going to actually have an impact, or will they just be a name on a sheet or, you know, a face at the table? And then beyond that, are they the people to really speak for us? Are they even associated with our issues? Did they grow up in spaces and communities like we grew up? Do they understand what we're going through? Do they understand what public education looks like? And so if they can't associate with those issues, then it's just because they check the black box. That's it. Exactly. That's one reason why.
They say all skin folks ain't your kin folks.
Exactly.
And sometimes and I agree, sometimes they just throw a person on there, and sometimes they might not all set them up to fail and be like, see, they couldn't put all the pressure on them, put this and that, just to see how well they handle this corporation. Probably end up firing them, probably just trying to save face, or just, it don't matter how bad or good of a job they're doing, as long as we have that black checkbox there, then the company can't say nothing. And then one thing about us, to save black dollars, you know, we'll see, oh, hypothetically, Target just put a black CFO. Okay, we're gonna shop at Target now just because we've seen the skin color. And I think that's one thing about us as blacks too, that I feel like we get sidetracked so quick. We see one thing without doing research, without actually seeing what's going on. As soon as we just see somebody up there that look like us, we just automatically think, okay, they're for us. And come to find out, like you said, Ben Carson, when Ben Carson got there, we thought maybe, okay, Trump added a little sprinkle. Now when he started talking, you like, okay, yeah, this this ain't working. So I think that's one thing as a race that we need to start doing, is stop being so overly excited when we do see us out there. Because like you said, like, is this person even for us? Is this person even know how much a gallon of milk costs? Do this person even know the struggles and the hardship that we go through? So that's one thing that I will say, Ayana, that I definitely agree with. But to close us out, Cedric, Ayana, this was, you know me, I could go on and on all day. So this was actually an amazing interview. I hope all my viewers out there have an insight of, you know, what to look for at home. You know, start the discussion at the table now. Whether you're in high school, whether you're a freshman, whether you're a parent and you're looking at this, open up the table, open up the discussion about what's going on. These stuff are important, and we have to break the cycle. We have to break the cycle. And trust me, this goes back to slavery, this goes back to civil rights, this goes back to the Jim Crow laws, this goes back to a lot of things, but it starts with us to break the cycle. Not saying that people are using as the race game. Some people do, some people don't, but we have to take accountability in ourselves to start, teaching our young adults, hey, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. We have to start, and it does begin with us. I definitely feel like the education system could tighten up as well too, but it starts with everyone being on one page is everything here. So just to close us out, Ayana, Cedric, thank you so much. And we will have a part 2 with this, so everybody stay tuned. And thank you for tuning in for the Achievement Gap.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.